I was just thinking about this. You can sleep for like 9 solid hours, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or even take a full week off work. You do absolutely nothing but lounge on the couch. And you still wake up feeling like you've just run a marathon.
Right. It makes zero sense.
It feels like a complete paradox. I mean, you put in the physical time for rest, but the math just doesn't add up. You are still completely exhausted.
Yeah. And we beat ourselves up over it so much.
We really do. But according to recent neuroscience out of Stanford and Harvard, what you are experiencing isn't a paradox at all.
Not at all.
It is a perfectly logical biological response. And that's exactly what we're digging into today on this deep dive.
Because the reason that week off didn't work is because we fundamentally misunderstand what is actually tired in the first place.
Exactly.
We treat this exhaustion as if it's, a muscle issue or a sleep deficit.
Yeah.
But the psychology research and the clinical WHO data we are looking at today point to something entirely different.
It's a phenomenon researchers are calling silent burnout. Okay, let's unpack this right away. Because if you are listening to this and nodding along, thinking you are just fundamentally lazy or somehow broken because a weekend didn't cure your exhaustion, we need to completely reframe that.
Yeah, we had to throw that idea out entirely.
We are dealing with a cognitive load issue here, not a physical weakness. And our mission for this deep dive is to really understand the mechanics of why your brain is doing this and how you can quietly reverse it.
That's the key, right? The mechanics.
So based on the sources we have today, how are the researchers actually defining this silent burnout?
Well, the core definition centers on a state where your brain has been running in this low-grade, constant stress mode for so long that it physically alters how it operates.
Like it actually changes its function.
Exactly. It starts aggressively conserving energy. In the original literature, they often compare it to a smartphone dropping to like 1% battery.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Right. The phone forces itself into low power mode. It dims the screen. It shuts off background application refreshes. It stops fetching new data.
Yeah.
Your brain does the exact same thing to your cognitive functions just to keep you functioning on a basic survival level.
I mean, I hear that smartphone analogy a lot and it makes sense, but I actually think it feels more like driving a car with the parking brake on.
Well, that's a really good way to put it.
Right. Because the engine, like your body is revving. You are drinking coffee, you are trying to push through, you are burning through all this fuel.
Yeah, you're trying so hard.
But the wheels, your cognitive output just will not turn smoothly. And eventually, the brakes start smoking. Because there is this wild contrast between the outside and the inside.
That parking brake metaphor is actually much closer to the biological reality, honestly, because there's active friction happening there.
Right.
On the outside, you look perfectly fine. You are showing up to work, you are answering emails, you are nodding in meetings, you are smiling in conversations.
Nobody knows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No one around you knows the system is literally smoking.
But on the inside, simple decisions like, I don't know, what to have for dinner, suddenly feel like monumental, impossible tasks.
Oh, the dinner decision is the worst.
It really is. You find yourself rereading the exact same sentence 3 times before it actually registers in your brain.
Yeah. Or you start forgetting small details you would normally remember in a heartbeat.
And you start noticing this unusual irritability bubbling up over things that never used to bother you, like a delayed train or a misplaced set of keys suddenly feels catastrophic.
And those are just the visible signs. There are also hidden signs that are much quieter, which I think are actually more dangerous.
Like what?
Well, it's this creeping sense of numbness. You aren't exactly sad, but you just feel incredibly flat. Everything is just gray.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that flatness.
And then you get this desperate urge to escape into your phone.
Oh, definitely. Just endless scrolling.
Right, but not because you actually want to look at social media. It's because your brain is begging for any kind of low-effort rest where it doesn't have to process complex information.
I really want to dig into how this hits people at different points in their lives, because the sources break this down by age, and I actually found myself a bit skeptical at first.
How so?
Well, if silent burnout is just a biological response to stress, why does it matter if you are 25 or 45? Like, the brain is the brain, right?
It's a totally fair question. But the nature of the cognitive load shifts dramatically depending on your life stage, which completely changes how the burnout manifests.
Okay, that makes sense.
If you look at the 20 to 28 demographic, they are still actively forming their core identity. So the primary load isn't necessarily, a mortgage.
Right, they're not worrying about property taxes yet.
Exactly. It's the constant low-grade pressure to compare their pace of life to everyone else online. That background processing quietly drains their mental energy before they even realize it's happening.
And then you hit 28 to 35, and it seems like all the pressures just completely converge at once.
That is exactly what the data shows. This is the window where career demands, serious relationships, family expectations, and financial realities all hit at the exact same time.
It's the perfect storm.
It really is. The research notes that clinical self-doubt tends to peak right in this specific window. Your mind is trying to process an impossible number of complex, high-stakes algorithms all at once.
And then moving into the 35 to 45 bracket, the sources noted that thinking patterns often become more fixed, like change feels a lot slower.
Yeah, and that's when questions about overarching purpose really begin to surface. People start looking around and wondering, is this all there is?
But here's where the neuroscience is actually incredibly optimistic, right?
It is, because while it feels like you've hit a ceiling, the brain remains highly changeable. It stays neuroplastic at every single age.
So you're never actually stuck.
Exactly. This stage is usually a turning point where people finally have the leverage to change their environment.
And what about the 45 and older group?
For those 45 and up, there can be this quiet fear of it being too late, alongside deeper thinking about legacy. But interestingly, some of the most powerful and rapid mindset shifts happen here.
Why is that?
Because the why behind their choices finally becomes brutally clear. And that clarity allows them to drop a lot of unnecessary cognitive weight.
Okay, but this brings me to a massive question I had while looking at this.
Go for it.
Whether you are 25 stressing over a career path or 45 stressing over your legacy, we aren't physically in danger.
Right.
We aren't being chased by a predator. So why is the brain reacting like we are literally dying? Like, why shut down the prefrontal cortex just because I have a looming deadline?
Well, it's because your ancestral alarm system, specifically the amygdala, cannot tell the difference between a looming deadline and a looming tiger.
Seriously, it can't tell the difference.
It cannot. It just registers a threat. Human brains evolved to deal with acute, short-term physical danger. A threat appears, the alarm sounds, you flood with adrenaline, you escape the tiger.
And then you relax.
Exactly. Crucially, the alarm switches off, and the nervous system resets itself.
But modern stress never actually switches off.
That is the core issue right there. Modern stressors like unread emails, relationship tensions, or financial worries, they don't have a clear physical finish line.
So the alarm just stays on.
Yes. There is no moment where the alarm gets to permanently power down because the next notification arrives before your nervous system has even cleared the stress hormones from the last one.
Which brings us directly to the Stanford University research in our stack today.
This study is so fascinating.
It is. They looked at how this chronic, never-ending stress literally changes how the brain allocates its energy.
Yeah.
Instead of giving you the energy to focus on the task right in front of you, like writing a report or, listening to your partner, the brain is forced to spend its limited resources constantly scanning the horizon for the next threat.
It is a survival mechanism that is completely misfiring in the modern world.
It really is. And the research from Harvard University explains the physical mechanism behind the lag you feel.
Right. They looked at how this prolonged psychological strain actually affects the prefrontal cortex.
And for anyone who doesn't know, that's the part of your brain right behind your forehead, responsible for planning, complex decision-making, and self-control.
Yes.
So what actually happens to it? Because earlier you said it's not just, quote-unquote, getting tired.
Right, it's so much more than that. Harvard researchers found that chronic stress floods the brain with cortisol. Now, in short bursts, cortisol is great.
Gives you that jolt you need.
Exactly. But over time, constant cortisol exposure actually begins to sever the synaptic connections in your prefrontal cortex.
Wait. It severs them?
Yes, you aren't just tired. The physical wiring you use to make decisions is temporarily disconnecting.
Wow. So when I literally cannot decide what to make for dinner, it's not a lack of willpower. My prefrontal cortex is structurally compromised in that moment.
Yes, the infrastructure is degraded. It's so severe and so measurable that the World Health Organization officially recognizes burnout as an occupational phenomenon resulting from chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed.
So it is a globally recognized biological state.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And furthermore, this chronic stress also disrupts the brain's reward circuitry, specifically those dopamine pathways.
Oh. Is that why activities I usually love suddenly feel like a massive chore?
Exactly. When that reward system is dampened by chronic cortisol, the internal motivation to do anything just disappears.
That makes so much sense.
It's actually one of the clearest clinical warning signs of silent burnout.
I have to push back here, though, just from a practical standpoint.
Sure, what's up?
If my brain's reward system is dampened and my prefrontal cortex is actively losing its synaptic connections, but I still have a massive project due on Friday,
Yeah,
my instinct is just to put my head down, drink 3 coffees, and just push through the pain.
of course. That's what we're all taught to do.
But based on this neuroscience, pushing through is actually the worst possible strategy, isn't it?
It will guarantee a deeper collapse. Because forcing a compromised system to perform at maximum capacity without repairing the underlying synaptic connections, it just generates more cortisol.
Which severs more connections.
Exactly. You are literally accelerating the damage.
That perfectly segues into the myths surrounding burnout, because there are so many cultural misconceptions that actually encourage us to accelerate that damage.
Oh, there really are.
Let's dismantle the biggest one first. The idea that burnout is just the result of working too many hours.
I'm so glad we are hitting this one. The research on occupational health shows that burnout is far more closely tied to a lack of control and a lack of meaning in your daily effort rather than the raw number of hours you work.
It's based on that job demand control model, right?
Exactly. If you were working 60 hours a week on a startup you founded where you make all the decisions, you might be exhausted physically, but you are far less likely to be clinically burned out.
But if you are working, say, 35 hours a week in a cubicle where every single move is micromanaged by a boss you hate,
You can hit severe burnout in a matter of months. It is the friction of powerlessness that burns the most cognitive energy.
that is so wild to think about.
Right. Another dangerous myth is the idea that a good weekend will fix it.
Ah, yes, the magic weekend cure.
We just established that this is a structural depletion of the brain's regulatory systems. You cannot rebuild severed synaptic connections with a 2-day weekend.
Especially if you spend that entire weekend dreading Monday.
Exactly. It takes weeks or even months of sustained environmental change.
And my absolute favorite myth to bust is the idea that if you aren't visibly collapsing, like if you aren't literally crying at your desk, you must be totally fine.
Right. Silent burnout is called silent because high achievers are exceptionally good at masking it.
They really are.
You can function perfectly well on the surface while feeling entirely hollow on the inside.
Let me challenge you on one more thing regarding ambition. We have this pervasive hustle culture telling us that we have to sacrifice our mental energy to be successful.
Our grind.
Yeah. The message is basically sleep when you're dead, push through the pain. Doesn't sustainable ambition require at least some level of sacrificing your well-being?
The data strongly suggests the exact opposite, actually.
Really?
Yeah, sustainable ambition actually requires you to aggressively protect your mental energy. A depleted prefrontal cortex cannot sustain the deep, creative focus required for high-level problem-solving anyway.
So you end up just doing busy work.
Exactly. You end up doing busy for 12 hours instead of deep work for 4.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let's look at the physical inputs.
Okay, yeah.
Because what we put into our bodies can either support this brain repair or throw gasoline on the fire. And here's the cruel irony. When we are burned out, we crave sugar, we crave massive amounts of caffeine, and we crave endless phone scrolling.
Which are the exact 3 things that deepen the cognitive fog.
Let's look at why that is.
Well, diets high in processed sugar and refined carbohydrates cause these sharp spikes in blood glucose, right? Followed by massive crashes.
And those crashes are bad news.
Terrible news.
Yeah.
They trigger the release of adrenaline and cortisol just to stabilize your blood sugar, which puts your body right back into the stress state we are trying to escape.
And what about dehydration? Because the sources made a huge point about just drinking water, which sounds so, generic.
Right, like standard advice.
Yeah, like drink water to fix your burnout. Surely it goes deeper than that.
It absolutely does. This goes back to a mechanism called the glymphatic system.
The glymphatic system.
Yes. Think of it as the brain's internal dishwasher.
A brain dishwasher. I love that.
It's the best way to describe it.
Mm.
When you sleep, cerebrospinal fluid physically washes over your brain tissue to clear out all the metabolic waste you generated during the day.
Okay.
But if you're even mildly dehydrated, that fluid becomes too thick. It's too viscous.
So the dishwasher can't run properly.
Exactly. So you wake up with a brain literally full of cellular trash.
Yeah.
And that measurably reduces your concentration and emotional regulation within just a few hours.
That is Fascinating. It's not just water makes you feel good. It's water allows your brain to physically take out the garbage.
Spot on.
What about caffeine? Because we always reach for it late in the day to power through.
Caffeine late in the day is tricky. It temporarily blocks the receptors that tell your brain it is tired.
So it's just a mask.
Just a mask. It hides the exhaustion, but it keeps your nervous system inflamed and prevents that deep restorative sleep where the glymphatic system actually does its work.
Wow. Okay, so on the supportive side, the sources highlight omega-3 fatty acids found in fish, walnuts, flax seeds.
Those are great.
Yeah, they're heavily associated with better cell membrane health, allowing brain cells to communicate more efficiently, and lowering neuroinflammation.
And regular movement, too. Even just a light 15-minute walk has consistently been shown to metabolize the stress hormones circulating in your bloodstream.
So you are physically burning off the cortisol.
Exactly.
I really want to ground all this neuroscience in reality because our sources provided some incredible profiles of people navigating exactly this.
Yeah, real-life examples always help.
Let's look at Sarah, who works in marketing. Her story really highlights that prefrontal cortex shutdown we talked about earlier.
Sarah is a textbook case. She genuinely loved her job. She wasn't dealing with a toxic boss. She actually took on extra projects out of sheer enthusiasm.
But slowly, she started dropping the ball, didn't she?
She did. She was forgetting details in meetings. She had to reread client emails. And of course, she assumed she just needed to buckle down and find more willpower.
Until that one Tuesday.
Right. She sat staring at her laptop for 20 minutes, completely unable to start a standard report she had written 100 times before.
The engine just stalled.
Completely.
The parking brake was fully on.
Her prefrontal cortex simply refused to initiate the task. And what's vital here is how she recovered.
Because she didn't quit her job.
No, she didn't. She recovered by protecting small pockets of true rest and putting hard boundaries around her availability after 6 p.m. That allowed her synaptic connections time to actually rebuild.
That's incredible. Then there is Michael, a construction manager. I found his case fascinating because it attacks the myth that physical labor somehow protects you from cognitive burnout.
Oh, that's a huge myth.
He assumed because he was on his feet all day, he was immune to something as abstract as burnout.
But the cognitive load of managing a crew, dealing with supply chain delays, and balancing safety protocols, it completely overloaded his system.
And it showed up in his mood, right?
Big time. He found himself snapping at his team constantly. He stopped enjoying his weekend fishing trips.
There goes the dopamine reward system.
Exactly. It actually took his teenage daughter asking him why he seemed angry all the time for him to realize something was wrong.
And his fix was remarkably simple. He started taking short phone-free walks during his lunch breaks, and he stopped saying yes to unnecessary weekend overtime.
It doesn't take a massive life overall.
No, it doesn't. We also have Jennifer, a nurse who was experiencing profound emotional blunting.
Yeah.
She wasn't angry, she was just completely numb to her patients.
For her, the turning point was protecting just 10 minutes of completely screen-free quiet time in her car before her shifts.
Wait, I have to stop you there.
Okay.
10 minutes. You're telling me 10 minutes sitting in a Honda Civic cures clinical burnout. That sounds a bit like a self-help gimmick.
I know it does, but it's not a cure on its own. Neurologically, those 10 minutes act as a circuit breaker.
A circuit break.
Yeah. By sitting in complete silence without a screen, she's signaling to her amygdala that she is safe. The alarm turns off, the cortisol levels drop, and her brain can briefly shift out of survival mode.
Wow.
That tiny window allowed her prefrontal cortex to come back online, which helped her regain her empathy and emotional presence.
Okay, that actually makes total sense. It's about breaking that continuous loop of the alarm.
Exactly.
Finally, we have David, a small business owner. He thought total exhaustion was just the required price of entrepreneurship.
A lot of founders feel that way.
But he was suffering from extreme decision fatigue.
David's major issue was task switching.
Which is so common.
Oh, yeah. Neuroscience shows that jumping rapidly between different types of tasks, like answering an email, then doing payroll, then taking a client call, forces the brain to burn through its glucose reserves at double the normal rate.
So you are literally starving your prefrontal cortex of energy?
Yes. David decided to reduce his decision fatigue through simple daily routines and batching his tasks. He ended up drastically improving his focus and getting more done while working fewer hours.
These individual stories really align perfectly with the broader data we have. Like Gallup workplace studies show a massive portion of employees are experiencing this exact same cognitive depletion.
It's everywhere.
And it heavily correlates with them actively searching for different jobs, often believing a new company will fix what is actually an internal biological state.
It's the grass is greener syndrome,
Yeah.
but applied to neurobiology. And the Sleep Foundation data backs up how fragile our equilibrium is, showing that even mild, ongoing sleep disruption impairs your emotional regulation the very next day.
Feeding right back into that irritability we talked about.
Exactly.
You know, I am noticing a really clear pattern here among all these case studies.
What's that?
None of them blew up their lives. Nobody quit their jobs to go live in the woods. Nobody fled to a month-long silent retreat.
Right.
It seems like recovery isn't about escaping your life, but slightly renegotiating how you exist inside it.
That is a perfect way to phrase it.
So how exactly do we start that renegotiation?
Well, the sources lay out a gentle architecture of recovery based on specific, research-backed micro-habits.
Hmm.
And it all starts with awareness.
Go.
The very first step is naming the feeling without judgment, saying, my brain feels depleted right now, instead of I'm so lazy and worthless.
Does the specific language we use really matter that much?
It matters immensely because language literally shapes how your nervous system interprets the situation.
How so?
If you call yourself lazy, your brain interprets that as a social failure, which triggers shame.
Oh, wow.
Shame is a threat, which spikes your cortisol, which puts you right back into the stress response.
It's a vicious cycle.
Exactly. But if you say, I am depleted, your brain interprets that as a biological need for resources, which promotes rest.
Wow. Okay, so name it neutrally. The next step the sources emphasize is finding 5 to 10 minutes of true screen-free rest. And we need to be crystal clear here. Scrolling on your phone is not rest.
Not at all. It feels like rest,
Ugh.
but scrolling is just a different form of high-speed cognitive stimulation.
Right.
You are flooding your brain with hundreds of micro-narratives, images, and opinions every single minute. You have to give the brain actual downtime.
So, like, stare out a window.
Yes. Close your eyes. Just exist for a few minutes.
The research also points out that we need to work with our natural energy dips instead of fighting them.
That's huge.
If your circadian rhythm naturally causes a crash at 2 p.m., do not schedule your most intensive, creative, problem-solving work for 2 p.m.
Work with your biology, not against it.
And we have to tackle decision fatigue, just like David the business owner did.
Yes, precking your outfits or your meals in advance frees up precious mental bandwidth.
It really does.
Every small choice you make burns a tiny bit of glucose. You have to save that energy for the decisions that actually matter.
This brings us to crucial daily habits. Psychology research heavily favors proactive breaks over reactive ones.
This is a game changer.
Meaning taking a break before you feel like you are going to die.
Exactly. If you wait until you are completely drained, it takes exponentially longer to recover. Taking a 5-minute break every hour preserves mental energy far more effectively than working for 6 hours straight and then completely crashing.
And single tasking. We have to stop the constant multitasking.
Please.
We just talked about how task switching burns glucose. Do one thing at a time. The sources also highlight journaling as a way to externalize internal pressure.
Yeah, getting the swirling thoughts out of your head and onto paper frees up working memory. It also makes early warning signs a lot easier to spot.
But perhaps the most critical behavioral shift is setting one honest boundary. Chronic overcommitment, saying yes automatically without checking your actual capacity, is one of the most consistent contributors to burnout.
It is the quickest path to depletion.
I struggle with that, though, because in reality, it's really hard to enforce boundaries when a boss or a client expects 247 access. How do you practically do that?
You start small.
Yeah.
A boundary doesn't have to be, I'm never working past 5 p.m. again.
Right.
A boundary can be, I do not check my email between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. while I eat dinner. It is about creating reliable, protected islands of safety for your nervous system.
That makes it much more approachable. Even just mindful breathing when you feel overwhelmed can immediately calm that real-time stress response.
It really can.
But changing habits also means changing your physical environment. The sources highlight some powerful environmental shifts. Number 1, keep your phone completely out of the bedroom overnight.
This is non-negotiable from a neurobiological standpoint.
Really non-negotiable.
Yes. Removing the phone from the bedroom removes the temptation of late-night cognitive stimulation. It prevents the blue light from disrupting your melatonin production, and it meaningfully improves both sleep quality and next-day cognitive clarity.
You also want to create one dedicated quiet zone in your home. It doesn't have to be a whole room. It can literally just be a specific chair in the corner of your living room that is strictly for rest.
No work, no screens, no serious conversations.
You are training your brain to associate that physical space with true recovery.
It leverages spatial memory. When you sit in that chair, your brain automatically begins to downregulate your nervous system.
And pairing that with morning natural light exposure early in the day is essential too. It regulates your internal clock and leads to much better emotional stability.
It's all connected.
But just as we add these supportive habits, we have to aggressively reduce the draining ones. We talked about constant task switching and overcommitment, but we also need to stop comparing our energy levels to the curated lives of others online.
That habit carries a massive psychological cost. It makes your own entirely valid biological limits feel like personal moral failures.
And finally, isolating yourself. When we feel depleted, our instinct is to withdraw into our caves.
We just want to hide.
Yeah, but psychology shows that connection, even just a brief low-stakes conversation with a trusted friend, regulates the human nervous system far better than isolation.
We are social creatures, after all.
So what does this all mean when we put the pieces together? When we look at the severed synapses, the exhausted lymphatic system, the drained glucose, it becomes incredibly clear that practicing self-compassion around rest is not some luxury or indulgence. According to the research, it is a strict biological requirement for survival.
I think that captures the essence of the data beautifully. Silent burnout is a profound cognitive load issue. It is not a moral failing.
No, it's not.
It is not a physical weakness.
Yeah.
Your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do under endless, unmanaged pressure.
It's just trying to protect you.
Right. And the way out isn't a dramatic overnight reset or a sudden burst of willpower. The way out is through small, consistent, daily choices that give your brain the physical room it needs to breathe and repair itself.
So if you spent this past Sunday doing absolutely nothing on the couch and still woke up exhausted on Monday morning, know that your brain was likely running a marathon behind the scenes, desperately trying to catch up on clearing out the noise.
You aren't broken.
Exactly, you aren't broken, you just need to change the way you recharge the battery.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today. We live in a culture that constantly, aggressively tells us our worth is directly tied to our continuous output.
Always be hustling.
Right. But if the science so clearly shows that sustainable ambition, deep focus, and genuine creativity actually depend on radical, unapologetic rest, is it possible that giving yourself permission to do absolutely nothing today is actually the most productive thing you could possibly do for your future self?